Our next guest found himself in the center of controversy. This after a Journal de Montreal columnist accused him of endorsing symbolic circumcisions. That was the big story last week. And Daniel Weinstock, professor of law at McGill University, joins me on the line now. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, geez, let me first off ask you this. How does it feel to be at the center of a controversy?
Well, not great. That's not the reason that you go into academia. If I'd wanted to see my name splashed over the headlines of newspapers and online for 5 days, I would have, maybe gone into media or politics. But it's certainly not something that I'm used to.
Okay, so why don't you break it down for me? When did you know something was up? Did you get a phone call from... No. So what happened?
So on Wednesday morning last week, I was walking into the office after having had a meeting where I couldn't really look at my phone, and noticed that you know when your phone is acting up, that you're getting dozens of messages all at once. So I knew that something was up. I clicked and saw first the original article by the columnist at Journal de Montréal, and following hot on its heels, a sort of news report, Journal de Québec, saying that I had been uninvited within, I would say about an hour of that column coming out.
Yeah.
I tried reaching the people who are organizing the forums, who are usually very prompt in picking up the phone when one of their speakers calls, and it was radio silence. So at that point I knew that something was going on, and it went on from there.
So the forum, of course, is on the future of religion and ethics education courses taught in the province's high school.
That's right.
Columnist for Journal de Montréal incorrectly states that you're in favor of certain types of religious circumcision. Is that the gist of it?
That's the gist of it, yeah. There's a lecture that I gave at Berkeley about 11 years ago, I think it's 2008 or 2009, where I lay out the arguments that were put forward by people in the state of Washington near Seattle who had been advocating something called the Seattle Compromise. Basically, to make a very long and complicated story as short as possible, there was a community of Somali refugees that were installed in the Seattle area, and doctors started seeing young girls, young women, showing up with terrible sepsis, septic shock, real butchering, because full infibulation, full female circumcision had been done on them in their homes, basically, or in completely non-sterile conditions. So in a sort of desperate course, the doctors suggested that rather than doing that, they bring their girls in for a kind of ritual, very minor sort of, ritual marking, so that they would avoid the worst possible conditions, which in some cases included death. So, I laid that out as a kind of a dilemma that these doctors faced. But of course, it's very easy when you're sort of laying out the position of somebody that you're then going to go on to disagree with to make it sound like you are endorsing their position. And with a little bit of a snipping of, the time code on the lecture, they could make it sound that way. So that's basically where this got started. They attributed views to me that I was just sort of explaining on behalf of the audience there, views that were put forward by physicians whose positions I was trying to make clear.
Speaking with Daniel Weinstock, professor in McGill's Faculty of Law, about his invitation and then subsequent uninvitation to a forum on the future of religious and ethics education courses taught in the province. So, Daniel, this comes out, and then a lot of people really rush to your defense, right? In the media, other people say, this is not what happened. This wasn't said. At what point, but then despite all that, initially, from the education minister, Jean-François Roberge, from the premier himself, they're like, you know what, but still, he said these kinds of things and maybe he shouldn't be there.
Well, then the position started getting a little bit more nebulous. So around 4:30 that first afternoon, I got a call from someone fairly high up in the education sort of civil service, where basically they kind of acknowledged that they had made a mistake in sort of taking what the columnist from the Journal said at face value, but then went on to say that because of the controversy that now surrounded me, because this had made the sort of rounds of the media over the hours preceding, that it was probably better that I not come to deliver the lecture that I had been asked to give, because they didn't want, or perhaps I didn't even want, the controversy to overshadow the work of the forums, which left me a little bit at a loss, because of course the controversy was entirely of their own making. If the columnist in question is one who who, and basically makes his living. His bread and butter is being a bit of a controversy, being a bit of a provocateur. And, if you try to provoke every day, the currency of your provocations tends to go down. They could have just ignored it, let me give my talk, which was pretty inoffensive, I have to say, dealing with ethics for, elementary and high school students, and everybody would have had a nice weekend. And instead, we end up with, a little bit of a minor political crisis.
And now, by the way, how many people have actually apologized to you, like a real apology that you're satisfied with?
So the minister, I have to say, and I do want to point this out, after the sort of semi-non-apology of Friday, where they basically apologized for a lack of politeness in having not called me directly to tell me that I was being disinvited, I guess, they really took the weekend to make a bit of to take stock of what had happened and realized that they'd really, really made a bad mistake. And so on Sunday, the minister called me and really did apologize in a fulsome way. And I think his public apology, which was made public, I think, yesterday afternoon, really was, and I want to point this out. Apologies are hard to make in politics because they come at a cost.
Yeah.
He's taking a hit. The editorial cartoon in Le Devoir today is it's not humiliating, but it's a bit of a, you don't want to be a politician with a dunce's cap on your head, having written, I apologize to Professor Weinstock 10 times on the blackboard. It's just not good politics. So he knew that he was going to take a hit, and yet I think he took it because he realized that ultimately it was the right thing. And, I want to point that out because it is not something that's easy to do in life, and it's certainly not something that's easy to do in politics.
Daniel, thanks for pointing out that editorial cartoon. I'm going to tweet that out for all of our listeners so they can have easy access to it because it is quite good. So the apology does come in. So are you going back to this forum?
Well, so there's a timing issue. The forum that I'm supposed to speak at this week was actually supposed to be about 2.5 weeks ago in Trois-Rivières, and of course there was that big snowstorm, so they had to cancel it. And now it just becomes a timing issue. They decided to do it on a Thursday rather than a Friday before spring break because, quite rightly, they thought that if they did it on the Friday, nobody would turn up. Mm-hmm. And Thursday's a much more difficult day to schedule given my other responsibilities. If I don't show up, it really is because of technical scheduling reasons, not because of any remaining bad blood between me and the minister or the ministry. I want to make that very clear. It could be that I won't be able to, but it really will be for those kinds of reasons.
Did you get an apology from the columnist, Richard Martineau?
No, I don't think he's the kind of columnist that apologizes. There was a retraction or an adjustment, a kind of recognition of the fact that he attributed words to me that weren't mine in the paper, I think, not the following day, but the day after, that was, let's be honest, sort of caused by lawyers talking to one another. But he, I think that already, just recognizing that he had, it's hard to imagine conditions under which he did not realize that these were not my words. So having, played with the text, played with the transcript, it was kind of hard for him being presented with the evidence not to turn around and say, yeah, okay, these aren't the words that Weinstock spoke, but, and, there's a lot of stuff that comes after the but. But, my real issue is not with the columnist. He is well known in Quebec as being a provocateur. I think, somebody told me over the course of this whole controversy, if you haven't gotten Richard Martineau angry at you at some point in your career as a public intellectual, it probably means you haven't been doing your job.
Yeah.
So I just take that as part of the territory. My issue is really with the response of the government. We don't want our government to be taking its marching orders from any media without verification.
It's nuts.
Certainly not from, columnists who, again, I think he himself would recognize as a bit of a provocateur rather than a rigorous fact checker.
Yeah.
So, the fact that we have this situation today with the apology and my re-invitation, I think, really does close the circle on that much more important aspect of the issue.
You're so right, Professor, because really it was like the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday stuff that was really getting to me. Is like, what's going on here? What's reality? Why are we not dealing with actual fact? I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Not at all.
And I hope to have you on soon in the future to actually talk about some of the issues you talk about instead of the controversy. Cool?
It'd be a great pleasure.
Wonderful. That's Professor Daniel Weinstock from McGill's Faculty of Law.